Board meeting of Tuesday, January 14th at Town Hall. My name's Duncan Berry. I'm the chair of this board meeting. It's being held in person, obviously, and it's available for viewing via the GoToMeeting format. Before we open the meeting, I have to notice a request from the public. Does anybody intend to record this meeting? They have to first please notify me, who will then inform the other, so nobody attends to. Well, so let's call this meeting open at 6:31, and I would invite you to join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. Thank you so much. We have Ms. Flynn is going to take us through our public meeting portion of this evening, if that's okay with all of us. And I think we have a pretty straight runway here. First of which is the follow-up to the LCP meeting.
Yes, so last week on January 7th, the Planning Board, the Local Planning Committee, and the Select Board had a joint meeting to discuss the local comprehensive plan as well as the housing production plan and the open space and recreation plan. And so it was a really great opportunity to basically explain to everyone the importance of the local comprehensive plan, that it's a framework for the town and to address land use and growth development issues. And it's an opportunity for the town to evaluate its values, its vision for the community, and how we want to balance competing land uses going forward, particularly when, we all recognize the affordable and attainable housing needs as well as workforce development needs, in addition to preserving our natural resources, especially water quality. So I thought it was just a really great opportunity for all three boards to share some opinions, and then also look at evaluate the work that's been done currently, and provide some input and some feedback. And I thought overall it was very positive and very productive.
So we voted affirmatively to support the housing production plan. Will we also need to be voting on the local comprehensive plan as a board, or is this simply going directly to Board of Select Board?
I will ask that the planning board vote in favor of the local comprehensive plan, and that will also go to the select board, and then onto the annual town meeting.
So do we vote on it before the select board does, or, because I know there was
We can. It's not required. The
So
planning board, it's not required. It is required that a majority of the planning board vote to adopt the local comprehensive plan. And for the housing production plan and the open space and recreation plan, those are largely state-guided plans.
Right.
And it's important to have endorsement from, for the housing production plan, the planning board as well as the select board. It was also recommended that the planning board hold a public hearing for the housing production plan, which we did.
Right.
The Conservation Commission will be holding a meeting for the open space and recreation plan as we near a final draft with that plan.
That's not within our purview.
But no, that will also come before. I'll also present that to the planning board and ask that you also endorse that. But it's not that won't be a public hearing, but we do want endorsements from the planning board relative to these planning documents. We want to make sure that we have as much town support, particularly for the housing production plan and the open space and recreation plan. Those are submitted to the state for review and approval. But it's very important that the town
They require our support and then also
Correct.
Town meeting support, right?
Town meeting for the local comprehensive plan. So the process for the local comprehensive plan, the planning board, it's required that a majority of the planning board vote to adopt the local comprehensive plan. It's not required that it goes to town meeting. However, as part of our contract, it was stipulated that it go before the town meeting for approval, or at least a vote, a majority vote at town meeting. And so that's the intention for May 2025 annual town meeting. And if anyone else has any other input regarding the last week's meeting, please feel free to, if I missed anything. I know that there was a fair amount of conversation regarding the housing production plan and the local comprehensive plan to really reemphasize the fact that Harwich, many of the sections of Harwich are developed, and that we want to look for redevelopment and infill opportunities, as well as development to be consistent with current development patterns within those village centers that are unique to those different villages. And we want to ensure that there's that we are also adhering to smart growth principles, not developing for the sake of developing, but doing it in a very thoughtful manner that, preserves our natural resources, is respectful of our historic character, and but also creating opportunity for different types of housing, and housing at different income levels as well, in addition to economic development opportunities for mixed use and commercial development.
So it occurred to me at that evening, I don't know if anybody else felt the same way, but I thought there was some interesting efforts on the political side of things to get it over the goal line with word changes, semantic changes that would reflect philosophical differences. I don't know, do you know where those stand now? Because I suspect we're not going to see anything until the select board sees it, right? I mean,
For the housing production plan, or for which plan?
For, I think housing production in particular.
For the housing production plan this week, since last Tuesday, I myself, Joyce McIntyre, who's chair of the LCP, and several other members of the LCP committee have been going back and forth with additional language suggestions that to reflect comments from last week's meeting, as well as several comments from the concerns of the select board from their meeting on October 22nd. Right. So Karen Sonnenberg, who's the consultant, she did submit a revised version with edits, revisions in red, and I will share that with you tomorrow morning. I did send it to the select board, to administration this afternoon, so that they could share it.
Any sense of where they are with this?
They will be meeting to discuss it on Tuesday. So at this point, I have not had any communication with the select board. Mary?
The one comment, I was sorry that I had to leave when I did, because it was I thought, a very productive meeting, and there was a lot of good dialogue going back and forth. I just want to make sure that in the end result of both the housing production plan and the local comprehensive plan, that we're not demonizing second homeowners. Because it's just, it is, I know there was clearly a dichotomy in the conversation that was happening, and, we are whether we want to believe it or not, we are a vacation community, and we've been more than 50% second homeowners for a very long time.
Yes.
And, to demonize the second homeowners for, I just think sends the wrong message out for the community that we, I think, have been and have become. Sure. So that was my only concern, like leaving the meeting when I did. We talk about, we started the conversation about the Airbnb, and the one thing about Airbnb is, whether you like the Airbnb or not, Airbnb and VRBO are actually the ones that are collecting that short-term rental tax on those second homes. And Susie Smith renting to her brother-in-law isn't necessarily where we're capturing that money, and where, we've put the extra short-term rental tax on for the local edition, and we've earmarked some of that for affordable housing, and we've earmarked some of that for sewer. So we also can't have our cake and eat it too. We have to be, I think, cognizant of all that. So that was just the one last piece that I kind of wished I was around to say at the end, and unfortunately had to leave when I did, so.
Well, there was some discussion to that end about the fact that there's been a kind of a blanket castigation of LLC property ownership as a whole, that it masks and kind of like corporate, when actually, no, it's a trust vehicle.
Exactly.
And so I think that's kind of probably where the discussion, as I recall, kind of like
Yeah,
got
It was,
kind of beached on that one.
yeah.
So.
just to add to your point, I think underlying that, we're basically talking about a wealth gap that's accelerating, okay? And some of the numbers are stark. So it was page 44 of the plan, there are 10,522 housing units. 38% are vacant, half or more of the years. That's almost 998 vacant properties. So you can see that wealth gap. We live in that wealth gap. I don't think, as I was talking to before the meeting, maybe we need to put more emphasis on not accepting that we're going to always be a low-wage community. I mean, where are the job creation pieces of this? Where can we create more skilled jobs, whether it's working with Cape Tech or doing other things. We seem to resign ourselves to, we're all going to be in the retail or hospitality or construction's just 15%, or service business, right? The top three jobs were 20% was accommodation and food service, 17 retail, 15 construction. So, we also have to acknowledge we could create different kinds of jobs as well, and not just say that we're always going to be a tourist economy, because it doesn't matter where you are anymore. Correct. So I think there's some upside here as well.
So I think that kind of includes section B. You want to talk about the ADU?
Yes, very briefly, for this annual town meeting, in October of 2024, the governor signed state legislation for the Affordable Homes Act, and included in that was an legislation to allow accessory dwelling units as of right statewide. And the town of Harwich, we do have an accessory dwelling unit, so that legislation from the state will take effect February 2nd, 2025. Therefore, our accessory dwelling unit will be obsolete, and so town council will be working on language that we can adopt at our annual town meeting in 2025. The language, because it hasn't taken effect until February 2nd, town council will be working on that language as a recommendation. And as part of the planning board, we are responsible to review and hold public hearings. We are the vehicle for any zoning bylaw amendments. So I will be working with the zoning compliance officer, the town clerk, and town council, as well as administration, to move this process forward. And there are some technical items that we need to make sure that we file information and forms to the Attorney General's office in a timely manner. We also have to hold public hearings within 60 days of the annual town meeting, so I will have that posted as an addendum to maybe our extended schedule, just for us, for our purposes, and as well as a special meeting as we approach annual town meetings, just so that we're hitting the quorums, and we will need to make a recommendation at town meeting. So I did want to just provide an update regarding that.
To update our ADU, because we had some restrictions on septic.
There were some restrictions, like the owner-occupied restriction. That was not part of the state legislation, so that will
That would get
be
trumped.
taken out.
So do you anticipate that it'll just be a matter of striking the language that was inserted into the zoning bylaws and then making a reference to the fact in compliance with state ADU, something to that effect? And
That's my understanding as of right now.
Did you see any like red flags on the cover sheet saying this is what to look out for, that, there might be a conflict with what our intentions were as opposed to the state?
Well, the state legislation, there's been a lot of pushback from municipalities for a number of reasons with the accessory dwelling unit. And one, for Cape and Islands, for example, they did away with requiring that accessory dwelling units, if it's within a home, there has to be owner-occupied. There has to be some type of owner occupancy. And so I think Cape and Islands communities had strongly advocated not to take that language out, and that was removed. There were several other requirements relative to transportation stops that have added some confusion in terms of implementation. So,
Do you have any recourse? I mean, obviously for the reason we were just discussing, a 40% non-occupancy year-round issue.
I don't believe so, because the state specifically said you can't require that. And my understanding is if it's not in the state legislation, we can't condition it. Yes.
Septic?
So I just have
It
one
has
question.
to be in compliance with Title V septic systems. So there are Title V limitations in terms of density of an accessory dwelling unit. You have to be able to make, you will need Board of Health approval in order to do the accessory dwelling unit.
So it's always a fly. Go ahead.
So my question was is there any place where our ADU bylaw actually grants more rights than the state? So for instance, I think on the square footage,
Yes.
we might be
so-
higher on the square footage and we might be higher in a couple of the other provisions with it. So
That's-
that was kind of what I was curious about.
That's correct. So the town of Harwich allows ADUs up to 1,000 square feet, and the state legislation was 900 square feet. So my understanding is that that will also be changed to 900 square feet.
Okay, so we can't grant a greater,
I don't
Greater than.
think so.
town council is saying that we can't grant a greater right than,
I don't, again,
I
I
guess that would be
haven't
my
got,
question for council, is whether, I would think we
we're
couldn't,
getting- we're
I would
going
think we
to get
couldn't make it
clarification.
smaller, but I would think we should be able to make it bigger.
But not,
That's kind of what I was thinking
Yeah.
too, so that I'd be curious to see what they have to say on that.
that's what I'm going to find
Yeah,
out
all right.
after February 2nd. There
Yeah.
have been several iterations
Yeah.
in terms of some general comments. I've attended one workshop that the Attorney General's office, as well as I think Barrett Planning Consulting did. So there were several moving parts to this legislation. So there are there were a lot of questions that were still unanswered by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities and other state representatives. So more information to come. I do feel bad. I'm not being. I'm still learning what the nuances are right now. I'll have more information for you, though.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Can I also just make another request or reaffirm a request that we keep tally of how many come in and then how many are built? You and I had a discussion that there were 15 that came in, but how many actually happened?
So as of right now, Since 2023, there have been 15 building permits that have been applied for the accessory dwelling units. In terms of certificate of occupancies, I'll follow up with the building department, and that will be a good tally of how much has been created and how much how much has been applied for and how much has actually been implemented.
So we actually had an ADU bylaw pre-2023 as well.
Correct? Yes.
So, because I remember us doing, I remember us doing a few of them
Yep.
that were,
I think
before we made the initial change for
it's not like,
special permit.
we didn't expect like a flood,
Right,
because the cost of building is, I mean,
skyrocketed.
to build an ADU is,
400 plus,
yeah,
Right.
like,
according to Waystat.
So it's,
Yeah.
it's the, we can't pat ourselves on the back saying, hey, we have an ADU if nobody can build them,
Right.
right? So that's doesn't do anything for your affordable,
I know
for your,
some,
doesn't do anything, it's like.
But it was
having a
never,
house.
but the ADUs were never capital A affordable. It was never had a capital A affordable component to it. It was a way for people that were, house rich and cash poor to be able to stay in their homes and be able to, use the large house to the best of their ability, or to be able to stay local without having to move out, so.
Agreed, but that gets lost in the sauce and it's thrown out as
It doesn't
an
come up, it
answer.
doesn't find its way into your numbers when it comes to doing a housing production
Right,
plan.
it doesn't, yeah.
As it relates to a percentage and the shy list for
The subsidized
40B
housing.
applications.
Right.
And that, I mean, that's
goes
also
on
the
there.
that's the other thing, like, when we talk about percentages, the percentage of shy list is really important when it comes to a large-scale, affordable housing
Right.
40B that's coming in, that's trying to blow past zoning.
Yes.
That's when it's important. But all of these units, I think, are important, whether they're capital A or small A or workforce, because they're keeping people,
They could be
Local.
workforce, right?
they could be workforce, they
AD
could
and we
be,
just-
they could be keeping people in their house.
They could be keeping people in their
In
house.
20
they
years,
could
I
be
might need
building-
to do it, right? We don't know what's gonna phase
Yeah,
any one of
my
us.
garage is looking better and better.
There you go, right?
There you go.
So, thank you. So we're gonna keep a list, and we're gonna keep how many actually get built.
Yes, so thank you for that, and I do think it is important to keep tabs, because accessory dwelling units also, to Mary's point, that they aren't, to Ann and Mary's point, they're not maybe creating the affordable housing, rental housing, but they do give people options in terms of family members, and as well as helping to subsidize the cost of living for those who are fortunate enough to own a home, and they just need some help with the mortgage or their insurance payments, so.
We had,
It does allow people to stay within the community, so there is a positive to that.
just as an example, we had one that came before us that was a family, and the father was moving into the garage, and the daughter and her family was moving into the big house, and it was a way to keep
Everybody,
yeah.
him local, and for her to move back, and, at the time, the members of this board, as it was then constituted, kind of really felt that was exactly what it was designed to do pre the 2023 changes and the 2022
Wasn't
changes,
there.
so.
Well, if it's being used strictly as a rental, it still accommodates a section of the population at 900 feet or less that wouldn't be home buyers, they wouldn't be looking for a larger house. So it's not just keeping people in their houses, it's addressing a group of people that could, we talk about firefighters, teachers, policemen, people like that might be able to afford 900 feet, that couldn't afford 2,000 or 3,000 feet, square feet. So it seems to me that it's doing more than just that one thing.
it's a good part of the housing mix. Can I just add, and I feel like the scolding professor, but I'll take that role. So in general, about the local comprehensive plan, the housing production plan, and our third plan, the open space, right? I
And I'll
think
add the hazard mitigation plan
the
too.
hazard mitigation, and all those combined, if I, correct, cost the town $240,000 to create, correct?
The 3 plans.
3 plans.
The
But
housing
that's still-
production, the hazard mitigation plan is separate. That's we received $20,000 from MEMA to contract with the Cape Cod Commission.
Right,
Um,
but that's still almost of $250,000 for these 3 plans. And my concern is that they don't become shelfware. So I just wrote down, they're inspirational, they're aspirational. I think our job is to make them operational. Okay, because I will feel guilty that this money has been spent sort of on our collective watch. Don't do something with it, which goes into our next thing about, we're gonna keep doing the same thing if our codes and our bylaws are the same. We're gonna keep building the same kind of properties.
Perfect segue.
Yes.
That's set up for you then.
Oh,
So, for the general discussion of Howard zoning codes, I did want to add one of the primary focuses that I have for 2026 is updating the town zoning map. And I will be working with the zoning compliance officer and administration on that work as well. We are looking for grant funding, and we will also put in earmarks for town funding in case that doesn't come through, but we do need to prioritize that. And for other general discussion of zoning codes, I do know that there's been interest with inclusionary zoning as well as refining our mixed-use development permitting and so that we're not hamstringing the residential aspect of a mixed-use development project. So I think there are some broad initiatives that have come from the LCP as well as the housing production plan. I think from town hall staff, there are some housekeeping matters that would also like to take a look at as well. And to Ann's point, zoning like these plans, I see zoning as a living document. It's never perfect, but you need to work at it. And we do want to make sure that we're being as thoughtful as possible because we want to make sure that our purpose and intent is clear, but also we're not creating unintended consequences either. And so for a larger zoning initiative, I know Brian Sullivan from the zoning, the chairman of the zoning board of appeals, and has also, suggested that there be a small working group made up of the ZBA as well as the planning board and maybe some other committee members to sit in and work on some of these initiatives, whether they're short-term or the longer-term issues, because I know both Emily, Mary, and Ann had talked about doing a more comprehensive overhaul of the zoning codes. So I think that, those are clearly long-term initiatives, and
But what's our priorities then?
so that's going to be part of the discussion. I think for priorities, the zoning map is a priority that needs to be addressed.
How broken is it? Very?
It needs to be certified by the town, and in the zoning codes, it references the 1972 map. So there have been amendments, but it wasn't corrected in that section of the zoning bylaw. So that needs to be amended. So for me, that's a priority for next year.
Has the overlay changed? Has what's permitted in different zones, is it different than it was before?
It's the boundary districts that we want to work on and make sure that they're correct, because we did have one project that the zoning boundary wasn't accurate. So we will be working with, we need to work with an engineering company to certify just the boundaries for that. And
I think we also spoke about having a kind of a comprehensive synoptic overview of the semantic coherence of the document as a whole. It may be a living document, but when you feather in language that's 50, 60 years old, some of those meanings have shifted over time, and so when they're not reflected in a map and they're not kind of tracked over time, and I think that it was John Eidman, probably like 4 years ago, early in COVID or something, came up with a red line version of initial thoughts. I don't know whether or not that's worth bringing up or not, but it might be a good springboard. The other thing I was wondering is whether or not there's a specified AI tool that might allow us to launch into a kind of a semantic exercise. That I know that this is anathema to the legal profession at this point, but I'm just saying from a point of
So,
view
yeah,
of
but,
zoning.
so I think really what the more important thing to do, so when you're talking about zoning, yes, you're building on everything that's been adopted time to time. The problem is over time, there have been some disconnects in certain sections. I think those disconnects need to be corrected.
Right.
And then I think you need to do an overview and see what you want added
Right.
to it. Do you want a first time, a small home
Right.
zoning district? Do you want, something like that? But you don't want to start, what you don't want to do is do a total gut from scratch so that you've got, you're grandfathering everything from today forward, and then you've got, 2 years worth of time to get it passed. Because it just doesn't work. It doesn't
Right.
work that way. When you're in a town, cities can pass a zoning ordinance in 3 weeks.
Right.
Towns, it takes us till to a town meeting.
Right.
And that time frame is really important, and that when you're making those bylaw changes, the AG has to approve them at a town level, where they don't at a city level.
Right.
So anything you touch, if you touch one part of it, they're gonna review the whole thing.
Right.
So unless you give them a red line version, then they're only gonna touch the red lines. But if you start doing, a replace in total and add in total, anything you've adopted over the last 70 years is going to be subject for review, and you never know what you're gonna end up on the other side. So I think you have to be, when you're doing the corrections, to pick up on definitions that you missed, or it's called one thing in one section and something else in another section.
Right.
Fixing those errors, I think you have to be really careful if you're trying to do
Right.
more than that first.
Yeah.
Well, but I think the idea is like, that's a worthwhile exercise in and itself. in and of
It
itself.
is.
And that shouldn't be too much of a heavy lift, I would think.
Oh, it is. On a document that's
Well,
that long
but
and that
I'm
old,
saying for us,
it's-
it'll be
it'll be a heavy
town
lift for
council.
whoever is doing it.
Correct, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
For us to review.
Yeah,
gonna be
correct, right.
So, and I think, but it's also gonna be an important way to stage, and get into some perspective that, the chronology of town development policy. And it's a good opportunity to see where we are and where we ought to be looking. And I think that's, if you've seen some of our meetings in the last years, a year and a half, there's concern about zoning law. So with that, Brian, would you like to join the conversation?
But I don't think policy is where you're going first. I think
No, I agree.
I think practicality is where you need to start on what's there, and then go from there. And I think
completely
Christina's
concur, but I just think this is part of
Clean it
the
up.
conversation that's gonna ultimately
Yeah.
open up, so.
And just really quick, Ann, when you asked about priorities, I think the zoning map is a critical priority. Some inclusionary zoning and maybe some definition changes for like multifamily, as well as site coverage in terms of pervious versus impervious surfaces. That has come up a couple of times, or not a couple, has come up several times with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I think there are some minor edits that we can do that can perhaps be useful. So those would be my priorities, but again, it's really the discretion of the board, and if there's anything that I can do to help move these initiatives forward, that's what we want to do.
Just one question, when you're talking the impervious versus non-impervious, is that when we're talking lot coverage? Is that what we're dealing with mostly when those issues have come up? Okay.
Regarding pervious materials, what our board has talked about, and actually had conversations at meetings with some of the attorneys and so forth, and is that the opportunity to motivate people, developers, to use more pervious materials, rather than, hard pan driveways and so forth. And even motivate folks that, as we know, as you go around town, we have, in our town, we have a percentage of site coverage that, we allow. I think we're the only town in the Cape Cod area, actually, I think we are the only town in the Cape that has a percentage for site coverage. And I think the only other location is in Nantucket. But, I think it's a good thing, and I'm in favor of site coverage. But I'd like to see how it's motivate folks to use more pervious materials, whether it's more stone, shells and pebbles, whatever.
Stone versus asphalt.
And, correct. Now, I originally had talked to Christine regarding that, and the board had considered that maybe we should look at pervious materials that whatever site area they're covering, only 50% of that goes towards site coverage. All right? So you had to motivate folks a little bit to use more stone. Christine asked me to start to write perhaps a draft type of, zoning document on that. And in looking into the pervious materials, I discovered there's a whole world out there. Even materials that offer the structure of an asphalt driveway, but have substantial pervious opportunities. And I think I pulled back on asking Christine to push something for this town meeting, because I think let's do it once and do it right. And that occurred to me, the fact of getting others involved. That's why the idea of a kind of a committee, ad hoc committee to help out. I even had a discussion with one of the engineering companies, Moran Engineering, and they would also be happy to get involved with that, having experts come in, perhaps someone who's a landscape architect and so forth. So we can start to outline materials that we're going to, enhance the environment, obviously be more pervious, less runoff, and that's one reason I think that having a committee to start looking into that and, dive into it deeper. But I think it is and I think one person at, one of the surveyors at Moran, I was talking to them, recommended, they said, you could look at it that anything over 30%, or whatever the site coverage is, might be for that zoning area. If they use pervious, they can use it 100%. I mean, a major motivation. But these are ideas, I think, that, we need to have a group to look at, reflect upon, and how do we motivate further development that uses more pervious materials. And folks now today, when I see, obviously, you see them on plans, they hit that 30% mark, well, they're going to be parking on their grass. All right? Well, guess what? Parking on your grass, that becomes hard pan. That has as much runoff as tar. So let's motivate folks to set up a parking area, on their lawns, giving them more than 30% they're using pervious materials, and then they can, on their landscaping, have a nice area, improve that and so forth, rather than everyone parking all over the grass and turn into hard pan.
Do you have a particular schedule in mind for this working group? Because I'm sure you'll find support here.
I just thought that, members of your committee, zoning board, conservation, obviously the zoning compliance officer, Christine, and whoever, and then I'll look at outside at, engineering companies and perhaps a landscape architect that might offer the thing, and perhaps even an attorney like, Attorney Kroll or someone else that has a lot input and involvement in the community.
Just to add to that, on the landscape side, there's been all the comments about, why do we clear cut, builders and developers clear cut a section when they're putting in a subdivision and then they
Sure.
go back and plant it. I mean, can we tackle something like that? You know, that we're doing it almost on an ad hoc basis. We had Davenport come in and a neighbor said, can you not clear cut? And they said yes. So, I mean, so instead of just doing it one by one, you know, it's a personal pet peeve of mine where they clear cut it and then they plant trees that aren't gonna survive after that.
Absolutely, I totally understand that, and I've had people come before our board that have
Yeah.
motivated me more to understand the issues of trees and so forth. I think that,
If we can't do
but
the
this
overall-
committee, whatever, I mean, I think that, you know, getting input from the community on that is very important. Each subject may require a different set of pros.
Right.
You know, so I would recommend the fact that, you know, that perhaps as a town planner, she can get the ability to pull a group together based upon the subject. So if Christine has the, you know, gets the authority to, you know, from the town administration and your board and so forth, to be able to pull together a group of professionals based upon, you know, the topic.
Right.
Exactly.
That would be the ideal
In
thing.
addition, this would be a great kind of laboratory for a more kind of structured relationship between our boards. Because ultimately, we have to initiate any zoning law, bylaw changes. They have to go through us, proposed through us. And so we ought to definitely be working together. And if we find success with this and success at town hall, success with the public, it would be a good template for us to continue on.
No, I agree. I mean, in talking about revising the zoning code, because of the zoning board's approach to it, when people are coming in and looking for relief, I think we see an opportunity to see more problems or issues with the zoning code
Right.
and where there's conflicts. Like, for instance, there's state laws or, you know, there's court rulings, like Gale and Dietrich and so forth, which make part of our zoning code actually inoperative. We have to ignore it. And what happens now is that, you know, people look at the code and they say, well, how could that, you know, as an abutter, how can he be doing that? I just read the code, that's not allowed. Well, it is allowed under mass state land court decisions, such as Gale and Dietrich. And some of these issues, some of these items in our zoning code need to be changed to actually pull them out or reflect that, so that everyone understands, you know, what the score is, you know, what the playbook is.
And the synoptic understanding,
Yeah.
the integrity of the document as a living document, if you will, it still has to be pruned.
Absolutely, you know, and regarding the map issue, we only had one case in the last year that involved that, where the code's saying 72. The 72 map said one thing regarding the delineation of two different districts, and it was on a particular case, you know, caused, you know, more of a lengthy review and, you know, hearings to get it resolved, because there was conflict regarding the zoning map and what engineers they might thought it entailed. Yes,
I'm
yes.
just curious, was it a situation that the zoning map was updated and the bylaw didn't reflect the update, or was the map just never addressed?
You know, I have to think back as to what the
Yeah, I'm
deal
just
was.
curious.
There was disagreement regarding where the delineation, where the line was based upon the street. And so the actual code from 72 was indicated that the zoning code, the zoning line
Yeah.
between the two different areas was this particular street in the center line.
Yeah, the midline, yeah.
Yeah, midline, and that caused a little confusion. We went to our own town engineer and so forth, who looked at it and said, here's the deal, and it got corrected.
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone ended up, even the applicant realized the fact that, okay, here it is, and then we worked things out with the applicant regarding, you know, that property. And I think the end result was that, given the location of the property and where it was with a very commercial-type area, that it, granting his permit, though he had to substantially change it, what his plans were,
Yeah.
Was a fair thing to do.
So do we want to work together toward a May 2026 town article?
Yeah, I would love to.
And then, so that gives us 16 months, plus or minus, plenty of time to plot out public meetings and hearings,
And what date did you say again? I mean,
May 2026?
26, yeah, I think that's probably the goal,
Okay.
and have things wrapped up by, from our point of view, by late next fall. I mean, as far as research and get that, in 25 done and done by the late fall, so then we can start approaching other boards and so forth about it.
Well, I'm sure we'll have plenty of enthusiasm from this board to help participate in that working group, so you can count on us.
Okay. Can I comment on a couple of things?
Please,
Okay.
by all means, thank you.
Appreciate it. Now that I got a podium,
Yeah, there you go.
be careful there. You may have to, yank me out of here. Regarding the ADUs, and I could be mistaken on this, but when the last ADU was done, when we changed it to 1,000 square feet and anything over a square foot of one, because I think it was any size lot, I thought at that time the state had some sort of ADU law that was based on 900 square feet, and we were going to 1,000. I could be wrong about that, but, because that had come up in discussion, this, why we're going to 1,000 versus the state had code based upon 900. So that last zoning update on that ADU would have had to have gone for the, the state, and it did not get
So
rejected.
ours was 900, and we
To
changed
1,000.
we changed ours from 900 to 1,000.
But I thought the state at that point had a
I
square
think
foot.
I don't think there was a statewide ADU.
Wasn't? Okay.
No, I think there was a model zoning bylaw that was put out by the Cape Cod Commission, that had actually happened probably in 2019, 2020, which ours was kind of tailored to a little bit, because when we first made changes, we kept special permit permitting in it. Then the second time around, when we made changes, we were asked to change to any zoning district and just do a review
Right.
straight, as opposed to different, because I want to say, like, in a legal non-conforming zoning district, you had to have 14,000 square feet, whereas in a regular rural residential, I think you had to have 40,000 to have your ADU. So I think we made those changes, and we went from 900 to 1,000, but I don't remember there being
Okay.
a statewide one. I think it was just ours and the Cape Cod Commission's model bylaw.
I'd be
We all kind of
surprised the
looked at.
state would object to us being a little bit larger than...
Larger, yeah. me
Right.
too.
I can't imagine, they wouldn't want you to go to 800,
Right.
but I can't imagine the state would object to 1,000. But regarding that, and I gather the new, and I haven't studied it, okay, but the new law that's being proposed would allow for the homeowner to also not have to be there full-time.
Right.
Okay. And but regardless, both houses then could be rented out for a minimum of 6 months. One thing about it, and I don't know if the state law has this included or not, but I'd like to consider the fact that if someone goes for an ADU, and now they can, have that for 6 months, that restriction get considered on their deed. So that, because like the next person who buys their property, that there is a restriction on their deed that, yes, they can rent their houses out, but only for a minimum of a 6-month period. Because once the property owner sells it, next person comes on board, hey, I got 2 houses here, and it may not even come up in discussion. And I think the next homeowner, the next buyer of that property needs to know, by the time they close on it, that there is a deed restriction on their rental. So then later on, they can't claim ignorance for not knowing about it.
is there a minimum rental restriction on the state that came
There
through
is.
in October?
Yeah, 6 months.
And it is a
Months.
6 months?
That's my understanding is.
Yeah.
And I think if we're, obviously going to parallel that, I think that if someone wants an ADU, and I'm 100% in favor of that, but there should be a deed restriction on that property going forward.
Yeah, I
Is it
think,
only on one of the units, or is it on both of the units?
It'd be on both.
I'm asking on
All
the,
those
on the
6-month
new,
situations on both.
on the,
I think it's on both,
It
but I'm
is,
not
okay.
positive on that.
Interesting.
I mean, currently now we
I
require
agree
the
with
fact.
Brian, though, with the deed restriction, it's kind of, when you sell your house, it's up to the seller to make sure that you're Board of Health compliant with your Title V septic. And so there should be some type of deed restriction that the new owner needs to know that there's a restriction.
or at least a notice that it was, that the unit was developed under ADU, under a statewide ADU bylaw, and those rules and regulations apply.
Correct.
But-
It might just be a notice that has to go on record.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Perhaps,
chain of title.
I think that, the deed restriction would be best, and then that way, the next buyer, can't claim they weren't aware of it. Just a couple other things, if I could.
Yeah, please.
All right. As I mentioned, during the meeting, the joint meeting with your board and the selectmen and the planning committees, I think the document that has been proposed for the housing production plan and the long-term plan are excellent. And as you pointed out, the town spent $250,000 on this puppy. I don't feel that there's a proper procedure for implementation of the plan.
There's none.
There needs to be a budget. And before this goes to town meeting, my recommendation is the fact that a budget be put in this plan, that, everyone is voting on, whatever that budget might be, and I'm gonna throw out, say, $300,000 a year to implement it. Because it's gonna sit there unless it's pushed. And this is a very comprehensive plan. There are several great opportunities in that to pursue, but you need a staff to pursue them. And I know I spent a lot of, as you folks probably do as well, I spent a lot of time at the town hall, and I know how hard everyone's working already before, the truck shows up and dumps another set of requirements on their desk. So the town needs to staff up for this plan. And I think the town, and I'm not saying that the plan specifies who these personnel are, but allocate a budget which then town administration and the selectmen can decide, okay, what's going to be required. I mean, if you put in a budget in this plan, say for $300,000, well, town may decide you only need $175 of it. But let's get it through town meeting and get it approved for a budget that goes along with this, long-term comprehensive plan and the housing production plan. Because otherwise, it's going to collect dust, or it may possibly collect dust. And once you put somebody in the driver's seat who's hired, perhaps to assist Christine or her department, assistant town planner, whatever it might be, and some sort of staff, then now we've got, people in place that can start working full-time to recommend the priorities to the proper boards, what has to be done.
Well, just an observation, as a regulatory entity, we're probably limited in terms of what kind of enforcement can be engaged by us and by our department. I think a lot of this is the purview of building inspection as a whole. My question is whether or not we can require compliance of an entity that's already having, difficulties without kind of staffing up. So, my question is this goes back to our discussion about the difference between a plan, right, and kind of a set of strategies. This, to me, is one of the weaknesses that we discussed at the housing production plan, is it doesn't have kind of a series of check marks or benchmarks or gateways that would require, compliance to certain things. That to me was one of the concerns that we'd expressed in our discussion of this in public meeting. I don't know, did you have any thought about that particular? It seems to me like there's a blind spot in that document with regard to compliance and governance.
Yeah, I was thinking you were about to say something, Christine?
I was just going to say that for the housing production plan and the open space and recreation plan, we did have recommended strategies and action items. And I think the local comprehensive plan is going to make it more Harwich specific and to really identify who would be the appropriate responsible agency, whether it's staff or a planning board or a zoning board, conservation, who will implement some of these action items, and also identify what the time frame will be, and also what funding, if any, will be required to implement some of these initiatives. So,
Well, that sounds good, but I'm hearing Brian, I think this is an excellent idea about putting some money behind it, because that's a big revision, what you just described, to the plan. To get all the way down to, this is who's responsible, this is how it will be done. But asking for money to go along with it, I think is a brilliant idea, because then we have a funding source, rather than a good idea.
yes.
And I would think that, obviously, that the select board would be overseeing what the budget might be, and who knows, and then they push it out, then they would probably assign it to whatever committee, might be planning, conservation, whatever it might be, to come up with, their approval of that implementation, okay?
Did you mention that to the select board?
I mentioned it in
finance
one
committee?
conversation with one of the selectmen,
Okay.
and I have not pursued it further.
Otherwise, that $250,000 is gonna sit on a shelf.
Yeah, and, the other day actually, it was last night, I took a look at the selectmen's meeting, and I looked at the files that they had to go through for last night's meeting. It was over 700 pages,
It's ridiculous.
okay? Give this committee a break,
Yeah.
all right? To have them, without having a staff, to expect the select board to try to weave through this production plan, all right, and come up with priorities.
No,
It's not happening,
Right.
okay? The town needs more resources, needs more staffing and professionals to assist the boards. I know I'm sure that you see a tremendous value in what Christine provides you for that assistance, right? I have it with Rachel, with, the zoning compliance officer, and for my board. If I didn't have her on my team, it'd be very difficult being a chair of this board. And the selectmen need more resources if they are going to be expected to be involved in implementing this plan. And certainly, someone, a professional that can argue the points as to why this should be a priority to all 5 board members, so that it takes some of the politics out of it, takes some of the arguments going on with it, and gives us, the select board, a break and not having to weed through another 70 pages, what they already have already.
So you don't think they're overpaid?
I think they are so underpaid, but,
really not.
I think they have a, big task. And I'm not here to promote the select board. It's indicating the fact that they've got enough going on, and they need more professionals to assist them on determining what the priorities need to be.
Just one final comment. In the long-term plan and then the housing production plan, I wish we could count how many times it says housing crisis, okay? It's not a crisis if you don't do anything about it, right? You just keep calling it a crisis. If it's a crisis, you put resources against it. Is it really a crisis? And the answer keeps coming back, yes, it is. So you gotta address a crisis, not just shove it forward.
Obviously, unless you already own in town and you have property, it's tough for the average person to afford to come into Harwich,
Yeah.
okay? I was, speaking to Richard Waystack the other day, and he commented to me about I think he might have mentioned it the other night at the joint meeting, but, on a regular street in town, not near the water, a little busy street, recently had, one of its lots that was separated out and turned into a new Form A, sold for $500,000. Just the friggin' land on a standard street in Harwich. All right? Boy, those are tough numbers. If you
Well,
think
he
about
also
affordable.
said something like, he's had one transaction of a Harwich resident purchasing a Harwich property in 18 months.
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, that's his office record. I don't know if that,
my,
but that's an interesting statement.
yeah, and but one other thing, and I mentioned it the other night at the joint meeting, I do feel that the production plan, the housing production plan, needs to include a line item in there that recommends that the town evaluate how much contiguous acres there are available still to be developed in town, as well as what sections perhaps need to be redeveloped. Because in discussions regarding, having a new, village situation, well,
Right.
that's great. Where are you going to put it? And, I don't know how many 5 acres or 10 acres, contiguous acres, there are out there in town. But I think this production plan, housing production plan, needs to have and recommend, and that's why you need a staff, in the budget, needs to put together an inventory of what's available. And if there are priorities about doing different zoning or new density zonings and so forth, well, you got to start with what are we going to rezone? And where is it? And one last thing is, and Mary brought up the fact about, the discussions on, summer rentals and so forth and percentage. One only needs to go downtown in Harwich Port, in the off-season, and go down this Saturday, and see the lack of activity. And then you see how robust it is in the summertime, in the late spring, in the summer, and the early fall. And that's because of, the second home market, which is a big portion of this town, the amount of rentals that are done for summer rentals, and we have to be careful in how we approach that because, the economy of town will be definitely affected if we give a lot of pushback, to the tourist trade and people who are coming here to rent for a short term. It's a big difference between downtown Harwich Port in January and in June, and we need to keep that in mind. Well, folks, thanks for your time, appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you coming out tonight. Before we close off this particular part of the public meeting, we have 2 other people in attendance here. Welcome to step up to the podium, announce your name and address, and hear from you.
Yes, good evening, Patrick Otten, East Harwich. To help answer Ann's question about tree cutting, last year I submitted a citizen's petition bylaw to limit tree cutting on the perimeter of developing lots. So the setback perimeter, you can't cut those trees. Okay? That's a copy of what Mashpee passed the year before in their fall town meeting, which is a copy of what Wellesley has on the books. Okay? I presented it last town meeting, and it was turned down because I didn't follow procedure, whatever that is. So I have it before me again, and I intend in bringing it to town meeting again. I'm happy to forward it to you. Really, I'm here to tell you that it's here, I'm going to pursue it, I'm going to follow through with it. I guess my question is, what is the proper procedure? It is a bylaw change. Does that mean it's required to go to town meeting? Does it mean I can just hand it to you and you put it into the bylaw? Maybe I'm confused on how bylaws get introduced and changed and modified. Am I on the right track?
It's a great
So,
question.
I'm gonna just take a stab at this, okay? Number one, it is really difficult to do a bylaw change by petition. And anybody that comes into my office, I recommend against it, because whatever you put on that petition is exactly how it has to go onto the article and exactly how it gets passed through town meeting. And then it still has to go through Attorney General's approval and meet Attorney General's muster. So it is always better if you go to the board or the commission, the select board or this board, and ask a board or commission to take up the effort, see if it's something they're willing to make a bylaw change of, and support it and put it before town meeting. Because then we have the benefit, and the town has the benefit, of town council being able to give us advice on how it should be drafted and what should be done with it. When it's by petition, you are literally stuck to the exact language, and sometimes that language just frankly doesn't work because of the rest of the bylaw or for other reasons. So that's my 2 cents when it comes to doing a bylaw by petition. I just don't think it's the most effective way to do one. I think you approach the Board of Selectmen and see if they're willing to refer that to Conservation Commission, to Planning Board, or to somebody to look into drafting one for a town meeting.
So I did have the zoning and charter review committee review it, and they said it was fine.
So
All right.
They're going to want to have then the
So the
public
bylaw
meeting.
charter review committee is something entirely different. So bylaw charter review is challenged to review any bylaw that's
Right.
going to town meeting to take a look at it. That being said, that is still does not mean that the Attorney General's office is going to approve the language and say that we followed all the proper procedures and that it is appropriate and can be, that our town meeting approval is effective and could go into place.
Even though it's a copy of
Even though it's a
an
copy.
existing of an existing of an existing.
Because that's why we have lawyers and people that actually draft them and make sure that they fit into the
To Harwich's
overall,
bylaw.
into the overall scenario. And it's just, it is very hard to do a bylaw by petition because you run into problems. Like, for example, we had the plastic reduction bylaw in Yarmouth. We had it in Yarmouth. We took a vote at a special town meeting to extend the enforcement of it because there are unintended consequences. It banned all 7 types of plastics, and Stop and Shop came to our Yarmouth Health Department and said, we're gonna have to reduce 25% of the products that we sell if we can't come to some compromise and some changes. So those are the things that nobody sees until they go to get implemented, and then all that effort goes literally to waste when it shouldn't have. So I think if you have an idea, the best route to go is to go to the selectmen, ask them to refer it to the appropriate staff and committees, and then you can go from there and try and get a change into the bylaw.
So then that staff committee, it could be planning,
It could be, right.
that board or committee would present it to town meeting?
If the select board recommends that we draft or that Christine works with us to draft a bylaw, then zoning bylaws have to have a public hearing at the planning board, and the planning board has to make a recommendation before it goes to, within a certain time frame before it can go to town meeting and be voted at town meeting. So yes, there are very definite procedures that have to happen in order for a zoning bylaw to get approved.
Okay.
Whether it's done by petition or whether it's done by the town of its own initiative. So, and any of those defects, like a defect in an advertisement on a posting, a defect in one word, a defect in the timing of the public hearing, all of those things could make the Attorney General's office turn it down and say, oops, yes, we know you had a petition, we know you passed it, we know it passed by 2/3, and we're not challenging that, but you had a defect, and it can't be recovered, so you have to go through the whole process all over again, so.
So what you're suggesting for me to do is to take this to the select board?
I would say if you have something that you're interested in
Very much
seeing
so.
it pass, then I would recommend you start with the select board.
And my procedure with them is to say what?
Well, you would simply ask them for what you're asking for. I mean, I can't tell you everything you need to do, but, you know, if you want to see this type of a bylaw passed, then you would ask the selectmen to consider it and ask them to have town staff or town committees review it and propose something like this.
And then
See if
that
they would
removes
recommend
me
it.
from the process.
It doesn't necessarily remove you from the process, but, you know, it's not by petition. Because again, by petition, you are literally stuck to the exact
Right.
language that's on the paper. And if you have 5 different sheets out there for signatures, and there's a word change on any one of those sheets, they're all different.
Yep.
And
not
it's gonna
happening.
have to go 5 different times. So those are all the problems that you just run into, so.
And if I may just say, like, the process is a way to get some crowdsourcing to push into shape and kind of work out some of these ambiguities or unclarities or unintended consequences through, you know, essentially a process of public review. And it actually benefits from deriving and generating interest, PR, you know, attention of the public prior to, you know, announcement
All right,
at a
all right.
public meeting. And then on top of all of that, if you get the endorsement of a couple of the boards here, that particularly the finance committee, then that's like an imprimatur, meaning that you have really a solid base of support. This is not, and that's, you know, that process renders, you know, clarifies and renders more impactful the intended bylaw change. And, you know, I would say that I would encourage you to do that.
Okay.
And again, it's a long process, but
Yeah.
it works, and you end up with a better product at the end. And largely because, and this is why we're going through, you probably heard tonight, are kind of a comprehensive combing through the language of our own
Right.
bylaws,
Right.
is because we actually have a crazy quilt of amalgamated, derivative intentions from other jurisdictions that have been woven into the tapestry that we have. And so part of the problems that we have is usually, you know, kind of loose ends from that produce tension. So this is another way to, you know, improve it, because Wellesley is, you know, Wellesley is a great community and everything, but they have completely different demographics, income, you know, land use requirements, you know, so anyway, it's just.
And we do have development that has buffer zones. I mean, our
Right.
open space development, the exchange for higher density is to have a buffer zone on the outside. And it's really, people look at it as a benefit to their own development. It's really to protect the development next door from your
Absolutely.
higher density. So
Absolutely.
we have that, we do have that in certain instances in our zoning bylaw. So, so it's not, you know, it's not just a matter of simply, you know, not clear cutting the perimeter. You want to make sure that it's going to fit in with what we already have as well.
Right. It may be an adjustment of existing bylaw,
Okay.
which is a much, you know, smaller ask.
Your comments also apply to home rule petitions, asking for a home rule petition for a certain action.
I really couldn't comment on, depending on what it is. I mean, home rule
Reduction of
petitions,
pesticides and fertilizers.
so I don't know
I mean,
that, I don't know
We're
that a
getting
town.
beyond this board, but that's okay.
Yeah, I don't know whether a town meeting action could require a home rule petition, force the Board of Selectmen to make a
To
home rule
ask
petition.
of the select board to present it to the legislature.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I don't know that I don't know that you can, I don't believe you can force the Board of
True,
Selectmen.
they made that
So-
clear. All I can do is ask.
Right, so then it's, you know, if you want to do a petition, you do a petition, and the petition is advisory in nature and really nothing more than that.
All right. Right, so taking that to the select board is beneficial?
I can't make that decision for you. You have to decide whether you,
All right.
whether you think it's worth asking them to do it or not. I mean, if your point is to have a vote before a town meeting, then
Yeah,
That-
it is, yeah.
that's different than just asking the selectmen to.
I'm just following in the footsteps of Orleans, Wellfleet, and Eastham on these issues.
Yeah,
They've already done this process. So, okay, your comments have been helpful, so thank you.
Thank you,
I
Patrick.
didn't mean to take up all your time.
No, that's great. I appreciate your input here. Thank
All
you
right,
so much. Anybody else wish to address the board? Matt? No, okay. Well, I think we covered some of the updates on the LCP, and the other material that's in there. Were there any other further points in that town planner update?
Just one that wasn't on, that didn't make the bullet. There is a volunteer fair
Oh, yeah.
on January 23rd. I will be going to advocate for more members on the planning board. We do have one vacancy for 7 members and then 2 alternates that are open. So I'll be sitting with the zoning board of appeals and advocating, just if, in case anyone is interested, we'll have a form for those in the public who come, if they want to fill it out, and encourage more participation, so.
Conservation's going to be there also.
Yes, that's correct.
what we
Conservation, the Natural Resource Department will also be there, and that's January 23rd, next Thursday from 4 to 6 at the community center.
The other thing that we mentioned in our conversation earlier today, I would appreciate it if you would send to us any state-sponsored seminars for planning board members, because I think there may be embedded in one of those seminars something that we could all focus on, whether or not we all attend. At least we have a couple of people that might be able to take a Saturday morning and go out to wherever it is. I think last time I went out was like Worcester or something like that, and then
Yes, the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative hosts an all-day workshop, or all-day conference with multiple workshops, ranging from pesticides, tree preservation type bylaws, as well as natural resource protection, any updates relative to state legislation, accessory dwelling units, other inclusionary zoning. So they run the gamut, and then they also do writing defensible decisions, roles and responsibilities, very similar to the session that we had with Amy Questle last year for the planning board members as well as zoning board of appeals. So yes, I'll send you any information from the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative. They have, the conference is usually the 3rd weekend in March out at Holy Cross College. And they also do host workshops throughout the year, and they do them online. So any forums, I'll be sure to
and there's town
forward to the board.
reimbursement for the fees and the travel expenses. It may
Correct.
be, we don't have to, if we were to get a group of, let's say, 4 of us and head on out there, we don't have to have a public meeting announcement or anything, do we? Because we're not conducting a meeting, we're attending a seminar. I just want to get into like, let's do this right, because it would be nice to have a group of us all on the same page, at least in terms of the statutes involved.
In case if there are 4 or more, I would recommend just to say, as a
Post
group,
it
you'll
anyway.
be there, just to be on the safe side. But Mary, if you want to help me out with this.
I always think it's a fine line, like, to me, you're not deliberating on anything, but if
Right.
if ADUs are gonna come up and you're gonna be in an ADU session, maybe you want it posted just to cover yourselves, just in case.
Yeah. And I'm happy to do that at any time, so.
We'll
Just
put your
remember you
cell
have to do
phone,
minutes afterwards.
What's
put
that?
your cell phone in the
Right.
notice and just give you a
Oh, yeah,
call.
Exactly.
Minutes after,
Yeah, if you post
You have
an
to do
agenda, you need
minutes.
to have a corresponding set of minutes, and even if it's just no deliberation happened, they attended X, Y, and Z, and no deliberation on any matter happened.
Okay, that's good.
I think we can do that. I'll do that right now. All right, is there any further business before the board this evening? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.